Powerful, ingenuity, and massive. These are common terms to describe the powerful steam locomotives that once ruled the rails of the United States. The epitome of all these descriptions is none other than Union Pacific's prized possession, the 4884, number 4014, the Big Boy. In the last couple of weeks, 4014 has been on the Great Race Across the Southwest, a 64-day tour of the southwest portion of the United States, including the states of Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Nevada, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, Utah, and finally Wyoming. In this video production, we will be following the Big Boy throughout the Lone Star State and also have a short talk with Ed Dickens. So sit back and join us for a chase with the King of Steam. This is Union Pacific Big Boy number 4014, Journey Through the Lone Star State. It was 3 in the morning when we left our homes in Louisiana and we had a course for Texas. After a night tied down in College Station, the Big Boy would make way for a town already familiar with the sounds of a whistle from a steam locomotive, Palestine, Texas, home of the Texas State Railroad. We decided to intercept the Big Boy in Hearne, Texas. Hearne has had an interesting railway history thanks to the Diamond. Union Pacific owns both of the lines in the present day, but at one time, the Mopac and the Southern Pacific crossed here. The restoration of the Big Boy is no doubt the biggest railfan event of the century so far. For years, railfans dreamed of seeing one of these powerhouses operate on the rails under its own power, but most believed that the task was impossible, and the Big Boys would never travel across the rails again. Now, in 2019, the dreams of many railfans have come true. Joined by hundreds of other spectators, we heard the deep blow of 4014's whistle for the first time. So to get to Palestine, the Big Boy would have to get off the former SP line and make its way to the Mopac line, giving us an opportunity to see the Big Boy back the whole train onto the Mopac. The title of Big Boy was rightly given to these locomotives. The locomotive class was nearly called the Wasatch, but thanks to a UP employee with a piece of chalk, the behemoth locomotives were given the name that every railfan knows today. To give a nod towards that, the words Big Boy were written on front of the boiler of 4014. The 4884 classes were over 132 feet in length and weighed in at 1,250,000 pounds. Both of those measurements include the tender. The water capacity of the Big Boys were 25,000 gallons, and back when coal was used to power the engine, the tender could hold 56,000 pounds. 4014 was later converted to burn oil instead of coal during its restoration. After getting aligned for a straight shot to Palestine, the chase was on. A few miles outside of Hearne, we got a nice shot of 4014 racing by the farmlands. It amazed me how many pacers were present. Unfortunately, these pacers held up traffic for a large portion of the journey and cost many rail fans chances to get more photos. We did manage to get ahead of the train finally, and we found a quick crossing to get the train at. I set up with barely any time left as the big boy navigated its way through the S-curve. The big boy arrived at Palestine with a huge crowd awaiting. Unfortunately, this would be the end of the line for the George Bush unit. 4014 moved up to give room for the SD-70 ACE to disconnect and move back into the yard to await for an incoming manifest to take it to Little Rock, Arkansas. Another lone SD-70 would replace the Bush unit on the excursion. "4141 joined the consist in Houston, Texas. Many railfans figured the locomotive would break off the train in College Station and be put on display, but they did not realize that the Bush Library did not have the display area complete yet. The 4014 was built in November 1941 by the American Locomotive Company in New York along with 24 identical units. The 4014 was delivered to the Union Pacific the following month, just in time for the United States entry into World War II. 4014 would assist the American War Machine by hauling cargo between Ogden, Utah and Cheyenne, Wyoming. After 20 years of service, 4014 was retired along with the 24 other big boys. 4014, along with 7 other big boy locomotives, ended up being spared from the scrapyard and were sent to various public display locations. 4014 ended up at the Rail Giants Museum in California. After years and years of demand for a big boy to run again, Union Pacific told the steam crews to try and get a big boy restored to operational condition, and in 2013, the 4014 was acquired once again by UP and was sent to Cheyenne, Wyoming for restoration the following year to begin a several-year restoration. In the May of 2019, the big boy would have a fire in its firebox for the first time in 58 years to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. After a water fill-up, The big boy reversed back into the train at the display area. Crowds swarmed the area to catch a glimpse of this American power. While admiring the big boy, a northbound UP manifest rolled by. We saw this manifest multiple times throughout the day, since it had been following closely behind the excursion. The Union Pacific Senior Manager of Heritage Operations, Ed Dickens, was socializing with rail fans, and we managed to speak with him for a few minutes. We asked him about the process of rebuilding the massive locomotive, and he went into great detail.
All right, thank you for doing this. So can you tell us some of the steps of rebuilding the rebuilding process for 4014?
Some of the steps, well, we took it completely apart. One of the most significant thing is that you've got to disassemble it, which means the front engine has to come apart, come out of it. And that's a pretty big process with an articulated, the way everything fits together. You've got to lift it up high enough in order for certain parts of it to clear other parts. And then when you do that, you've got to lift up the rest of the boiler so everything disengages. Putting it back together is more intricate because it all has to fit back together again, but you just don't lift it up. You've got to lift it up a certain way, a certain height. And as you're lifting it, then you've got to lower it back down again. So we actually made a video about how we did that, explaining kind of the general principle behind everything. Just disassemble everything down to bare metal and blast it completely clean. Take everything apart and make all the new parts that you need new. Just make it all new. The most important part of a steam locomotive, and there's a lot of very important parts, but the most critical is the boiler because it's a pressure vessel, and that means that it has to be certified and engineered to withstand its original design. So you've got a lot of welding, and anything that isn't up to speed has to be completely removed and replace it with new. Sometimes it's easy to get involved to where you want to try to avoid the heavy repair, but you really have to get your head around what I call the heavy repair. And that means that you tear into it. And you're brutal when you tear into that boiler. If it isn't right, you cut it out of there. If you're tempted to weld it up, think about that, because that process of welding or building up that metal, think about replacing it with new metal. That's really what, in my judgment, what you should do. The regulations, the codes allow some of that weld buildup, and there are times when the weld buildup is something that you're probably better off doing. But just make it all new. Same thing with the stay bolts. Doesn't look right, it's probably not right, get it out of there. We replaced 800 stay bolts in this locomotive. And I would have been fine if we replaced 1,800 or even 2,000, because every new bolt is just that much step, that farther a step in the right direction. So just a lot of work on this thing. Square up the engine truck, square up the trailing truck, tram everything, get everything all back together again. Make it as new as you can, because we don't want to have trouble, and we haven't had any trouble out here. So knock on wood, we'll continue to make it home, good Lord willing. Make it home without any trouble. But there's always routine maintenance and little things that you do that are all part of any steam locomotive operation. Lots of servicing, lots of tinkering. The air brakes are 1940s air brake system. We rebuilt all that stuff, and we're having some challenges with lubrication and the heat. So some of the oil that we've been buying isn't up to the specification that we want it to be, and it can't really endure the high temperature, and it starts to gum the oil up, and that begins to give us some problems here and there. So just a matter of working through all that stuff, take it apart, clean it up, get better oil so it lasts better. Because it's tremendously hot in that cab. It's so hot, in fact, the modern air brake system just wouldn't work. Knowing what I know about the modern air brake system, I never considered putting that in here because of it. Well, I better get back over there.
All right.
The guys are getting started, but it sure is nice talking with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You guys take care. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
The steam crew wrapped up the day's work with 4014 and would rest up before the following run to Marshall. During the night, 4141 would head out on a northbound manifest and head for North Little Rock. The locomotive will most likely be stripped of its prime mover there, so we were glad to catch it under its own power for one of the last times. The next morning, we returned to the UP Palestine yard about 1 hour before departure. Already, locals and rail fans gathered around the tracks to see the big boy off on the Sunday morning. The steam crew finished up their last-minute preparations, and at 8 a.m. on the dot, 4014 departed Palestine and made way for Marshall. As you can see in this shot here, you notice the front set of trucks veer off the main frame of the locomotive. The big boy is articulated. The locomotive sports 2 sets of driving wheels, and each wheel has a diameter of 68 inches. Due to the great length of the big boy, articulation was needed to efficiently maneuver around tighter curves. After the departure, we followed the 4014 throughout the piney woods of East Texas, so enjoy the raw footage of the excursion.
Somebody asked me, said, what happened? Oh, I got hit by a red truck. That's his face.
After the big boy's 15-minute stop in Jacksonville, we found a UP manifest waiting for the excursion to pass a few miles out of town. The conductor climbed out of the cab to inspect the run-by. This would be a perfect opportunity to film two distinct eras of Union Pacific side by side. Here's 4014 south of Troop, Texas, heading for its stop.
Right.
Thanks to the stop and Troop, we found a crossing a little north of town and walked about 10 minutes through the piney woods to set up position at an S-curve to get excellent footage of the big boy head on. We grabbed some Dairy Queen while the big boy sat in Overton. As we drove through town, we saw more large crowds gathered around the locomotive. I'm willing to bet more people were there than the entire population of the town. After grabbing our lunch, we set out for a spot we've had our eyes on for weeks. On the south side of Longview, the UP line crosses over the Sabine River. Thanks to some clever photographers with garden clippers, we were able to get through the thick forestry and get an excellent view of the bridge. big boy getting closer and closer to Marshall, Texas, we decided to just head straight there before the crowds blocked us out. We arrived in Marshall to find rail fans lined up on the North Bolivar Street Bridge, and for a unique shot of its arrival, we decided to stand on the TNP 400's tender. After a very busy day for the crew, the train arrived in the Marshall, Texas, where it would tie down for the rest of the day. The big boy would continue to Arkansas the next Tuesday, but this would be where our chase ended. I want to thank all of you for watching this video production, and I want to give a huge thanks to Ed Dickens and the rest of the STEAM crew for bringing this great piece of American history back to life. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you trackside.